But the next person who's going to come up is our presenting sponsor, the Kentucky president. And Tom Partridge is a perfect example of, with Fifth Third Bank, that Louisville-Lexington connection, because he oversees all these markets. So, Mr. Partridge, please, thank you very much for being our presenting sponsor.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm so happy that you all came out here today to really hear what's going on in the Commonwealth. You know, at Fifth Third Bank, we kind of tell ourselves, and our tagline is, we're the curious bank. And we're happy that, frankly, you're curious about what's going on in the Commonwealth. You know, we have representation here today from the business community, the education community, as well as the government community. And when we all work collectively to move the Commonwealth forward, that ultimately is in the best interest of what we all do each and every day. So I can't tell you how proud we are to be presenting sponsor of this event for 10 years running, and it just demonstrates our continued commitment to make sure the communities in which we live in grow and thrive. So Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you. Tom, I also want to thank Fifth Third Bank. You are a major investor in our economic development, our total resource campaign. You're a very large dues-paying member, and we appreciate the fact that you're always there for us, and you're always asking us how you can help, and we appreciate that a lot. It's indeed my honor right now to introduce Governor Steve Beshear. I want to thank him for being with us this morning. You've had a very active but a very successful week, and it seemed like everybody that you met along the way this morning reminded you of it's been a great week. And we hope many more good weeks to come. But what we asked the governor to come, and it's kind of odd because whenever I feel like we have the governor here, I remember he was on our Commerce Lexington board before you became governor. You were our legal counsel. We always just had that kind of friendly give and take interaction. And so a lot of times whenever you have a governor come, everybody's all excited and kind of stiff. But when you're in a crowd with us, we all feel very relaxed because you're one of us. And we appreciate how you've led the state and the difference that you've made for us. But what we wanted to have him talk about today was the 2014 legislative session, talk about what he thinks may be happening in the General Assembly, and his legislative agenda, which you have outlined, and it has done some good things for Lexington and Central Kentucky. Also want to thank the governor because he has been a real champion for us on economic development, whether it be projects, whether it be out marketing us throughout the entire globe, saying very good but true things about who we are as a marketplace. But then also a lot of governors talk about economic development, but the one piece that they always miss is having a quality skilled workforce. And in Kentucky, one of our greatest opportunities is education. And so again, you've made those two items a priority in your budget and in your priorities for this legislative session. And in line with this mission of having a capable workforce, having a highly educated workforce, one of the things we're proud to be a part of and work with you on is the BEAM initiative, the Bluegrass Economic Advancement Movement that our two mayors, Mayor of Louisville and Lexington, have brilliantly pulled together. You know, the private sectors, we've worked together extremely well for a long time, and I wouldn't say that in the public sector we disliked each other, because we didn't, but now we know each other, and we have a dialogue and interaction that, quite frankly, the world, and especially here in the U.S., that people are looking at and trying to figure out how to replicate. And you can't replicate things like what we have in Kentucky, because in Kentucky the difference is the people and the genuine relationships and friendships that we build. And so I think that's the thing that will always differentiate us. As many of you know, the BEAM effort is a 22-county region. And what we're trying to do now is develop our strategic investments and our partnership and take those to the next level. Yesterday, the mayor announced Funai Electric, 50 new jobs, high tech, here in Lexington. It was between us and Asia. When anybody says it's about us and another community this size, no, we compete against the big ones, and we compete against the big global centers around the world. So, major coup. And I would tell you, we stood strong all the way through, and I think we were able to win that one as we've been able to win many others here recently. But again, the reason that we are able to be successful is because we have a governor and an economic development cabinet works very closely with us. They're part of our team, strong partnership, and it all starts at the top. Those things only happen when the leader at the top wants that to be the case. So I've rambled on, but I hopefully have pointed out it's a great relationship to have with you. And by the way, I was in Indiana with a bunch of business leaders this past weekend, and they kept saying, tell me about Governor Beshear, because you're having an impact in a negative way on Indiana. So I like that. Governor of the Commonwealth, Governor Steve Beshear.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I kind of like that when we're having a negative impact on our surrounding states. That means we're doing something right. Bob, thanks first for the kind introduction. As he mentioned, this is home. You know, Jane and I met while we were at the University of Kentucky. And I must tell you, the other night, when I was in Washington, after the State of the Union address, Jane and I met with the President of the United States. And we talked about some serious things. And then he looked at me and said, okay, let's get down to it. Are you a UK or a U of L fan? I explained to him that both Jane and I are UK graduates. I've got 2 degrees from there, so we bleed blue. But that anytime U of L is not playing UK, I'm for U of L. And he said, that's a very politically correct answer. And I finished it off by saying, look, Mr. President, let me make a suggestion to you. He said, what? I said, why don't you let me advise you on filling out your bracket this year? I think you might do better if you listen to the governor of Kentucky. You know, it is great to be here with you because not only is Central Kentucky one of the economic engines that drives this state, but it's home, as I mentioned. And as Bob mentioned, I've been a part of this organization before I got a crazy idea about becoming governor of the Commonwealth. And so I know this organization, I know what you do, and I know how effective you are as a partner in bringing new jobs and economic development and activity to Central Kentucky. So thank you for what you do. You know, in looking forward and talking about what's coming and what we need to do, it's always good to first reflect back on where we've come from. I was elected governor in December of 2007, and I entered office with some big ideas and some big plans. And 1 month later, in January of 2008, the worst recession of our lifetimes hit us right in the face. And for the next 3 or 4 years, just as you and your businesses have struggled to get through that, just as families sat around the table every night and tried to figure out what bills they were going to pay first and how we're going to keep the kids in school and how we're going to keep food on the table, state government went through the same thing. Over the last 6 years, we have cut a total of about $1.6 billion in spending out of our state budget to keep it balanced. We balanced it, I think it's 13 times in the last 6 years. We have reduced our workforce at the state level to the smallest it's been in 4 decades. But I'm proud to say that we didn't just use a meat axe to do that. There were a lot of states that took the easy way out. They said simply, we got to cut $100 million, we'll just cut it across the board and go home. We didn't do that. In my mind, even though everything that state government does is important to someone, there are a few things that state government does that are more important than anything else we do. And so we set priorities, and the highest priority was education. Educating our children, investing in the future of this state. Public safety. Everybody needs to be able to feel that they can walk down the streets and be safe, or be safe in their homes. That's one of the very basic duties of government. And economic development. Because in the end, folks, if our folks are working, if they all have good paying jobs, the rest of the problems I have become pretty easy to solve. Because those folks are working and they're paying taxes, and that tax revenue is coming in, and I'm able to invest in education and to have enough state troopers on the road in our rural areas to provide that public safety and to do the kinds of things we need in economic development to create jobs for our people. So, for the last 4 years, really for the last 6 years, in spite of that recession, in spite of all of those difficulties, we've made some great progress here in Kentucky. As a matter of fact, we are leading this country. We are leading this country in economic development. We're leading this country in education reform. And we're leading this country in providing health care for our people. I'm proud of that. And let's talk about each one of those for just a minute. Let's talk about education. You know, in the last 6 years, in spite of really having no new resources, our education community has stepped up and done amazing things. And when education people go around this country and go to these national forums, everybody comes up to us and says, how is Kentucky doing this? How are you all making so much progress? We were the first state to adopt the Common Core standards. There are now 45 states that are doing it. We were number one. We were the second state in the country to adopt the next generation science standards. Imagine that. We're going to teach science in science class. We raised our dropout age from 16 to 18. And in the last 3 years, in Education Week's rankings, and this is a national publication that looks at every state and ranks them on education quality and performance, we have gone from 34th in this country to 10th in this country. So that's what's happening in education in Kentucky, and we're leading the way in this country in education reform. Health care. You all might know I'm a little bit involved in that. Look, here are the facts. Kentucky is one of the least healthy states in this country. I'm not proud of that. I love being number one in lots of things. I don't want to be number one in heart disease, teenage smoking, pregnant women smoking, cancer, diabetes. Folks, you name the chronic condition, and we rank right at the bottom of the list. We've been picking around the edges of that. You know, we've done small things here and there to try to improve our situation. But when you get right down to it, we didn't rank down there at the bottom just last week or last year. We have been there since they started ranking these things. And I knew that we had to do something of a transformational way if we were going to change that. And then along came the Affordable Care Act. Now, you can like it, you can not like it, but for the first time in our history, we've got a tool out there. We've got a tool to provide affordable health care for every single Kentuckian for the first time in our history. Is it perfect? I'm sure it's not. But I'll tell you something, I don't have much time to spend on all this political craziness that they do in Washington, D.C., yelling and screaming at each other. If it needs to be fixed in some way, then sit down together and fix it. But my job is to try to make sure that 640,000 uninsured Kentuckians finally have affordable health insurance. Folks, these aren't some group of aliens from a distant planet. These are our friends and our neighbors. These are people that we shop with in the grocery, that we sit in the bleachers with on Friday night and watch our kids play soccer or basketball. These are the farmers on the tractors. These are the grocery clerks. These are people we go to church with. These are hardworking people that get up every day and go to work just hoping and praying that they don't get sick. because they know that if they do, they are one bad diagnosis away from bankruptcy. Now, that's no way to live. And if we can provide a means to let them have affordable health coverage, not only does that give them and their children peace of mind, it benefits this state. Why? Because a healthy, productive workforce is the key to the future in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. That's where this is at. Look, I do a lot of economic recruiting for this state. I'm all over this world. And I can tell you this, the top priority for every CEO I talk to, you'd be surprised, it's not lower taxes, although they like that. It's not good road system, although they want that. It's not tax incentives, although they want that. The number one priority, do you all have in the Commonwealth of Kentucky a healthy, trained, educated, productive workforce that can do the job I need to do to make us successful? That's what they all want. And that's our job. That's really ultimately our job. If we can continue to develop that workforce, and we've got a pretty darn good one now, but it needs to be better. Part of that is education, training, and that's a big priority of ours. A part of it is making sure they're healthy, because if you're home sick about every month, you're not going to get much production out of that workforce. So smart business people understand that they need a healthy workforce. And that's what this Affordable Care Act is giving us, the opportunity to increase the healthiness of our workforce. And so we're making great progress there. As you all know, we're recognized nationally as the model for our local health care exchange. And folks are flocking to it in droves. As I mentioned, we got 640,000 uninsured Kentuckians already in 4 months. We almost have 200,000 of them signed up for affordable health coverage. What that tells me is that there's a big pent-up demand out here for affordable health coverage for themselves and for their children, for their families. And if they've got a way of doing it, they're going to reach out and do it. And we're all going to be better for it in the long run. The result of all of that, education, healthy workforce, will be that many more jobs for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And we're doing pretty good in that area too. You know, in spite of this recession, in spite of the issues that we have to deal with every day, we've been extremely aggressive, as Bob Quick can tell you, extremely aggressive in recruiting new business from out of state and of working with our existing business to help them expand and grow. And we've been successful in those efforts. We ranked number 2 in this country in 2012 for job growth over the previous year. Now think about that for a minute. Out of 50 states, number 2 in the country. In 2013, we moved up to number 3 in building cars. And we are number 1 for creation of new businesses. We've set records in exports each of the last 2 years. We were named number 9 in the country by Site Selection magazine for our business climate. We created the Office of Entrepreneurship to enhance our efforts to work and help startup companies every step along the way. We've created the Kentucky Angel Investors Network to link private investors with entrepreneurs and startup companies. And we have imported thousands of jobs from such places as India, China, Japan, France, Germany, Russia, Australia, and Austria. Right here in Lexington, since early 2008, we've announced 99 economic development projects, representing either new companies or expansions of existing companies. And they've been in manufacturing, in service, in technology. These represent a collective capital investment in the Commonwealth of more than $360 million new dollars. $80 million of which have come since the beginning of 2013. And as these businesses follow through on their commitments and their plans, we're talking about roughly 3,500 new jobs right here in Central Kentucky. You know these folks. These are folks like Tiffany and Company, GE Lighting, Lockheed Martin, Tempur-Pedic International, Coldstream Laboratories, Bingham, Big Ass Fans. I love his governor being able to say that. I couldn't get away with it otherwise. And as you all know, what just happened at Toyota in Georgetown? Folks, they could go make that 350 ES Lexus sedan anywhere in this world. They could take it to Indiana. They could take it to Michigan. They could take it to any state in this country. You know where they took it? They took it right here in Georgetown, Kentucky. 750 new jobs, millions of dollars in new investments. Why are they here? Because they know that they can get that workforce here and that they've got a great business climate and good partnerships with us at the state level and with you in these communities around Lexington. So we've got some great things going, but we can't stop now. We've got to build on what we have because other states are moving ahead. If we stand still, we fall behind. So, this session of the General Assembly, the most important thing that will happen by far is the adoption of the next two-year budget for the Commonwealth. It'll be spending about $20 billion. About $10 billion a year over a two-year period. That will set so much of the policy for this state over the next 2 years and for even longer than that into the future. I made some choices because even though we're coming out of this recession, even though our revenues are improving, we still don't have any loose change laying around. The little additional revenue that we're accumulating will be more than spent just on the types of costs that you know very well about in your business. Inflation, the kinds of things that you try to manage and keep down, but they go up every year. And so I made some hard choices because I felt like we were at a crossroads here in Kentucky. And we needed to step up. We needed to step up and reinvest in the education of our children. I mentioned how far we've come in education. And folks, the education community in this state did that in spite of having no additional resources. As a matter of fact, they did it with some dwindling resources. I'm proud that during all of this recession, at the state level, we held what's called the SEEK funding, the funding that goes directly into supporting classroom teaching. We held it steady. We didn't cut it. But guess what? It's a per pupil funding formula, so the number of pupils went up over the last 6 years, but the dollars stayed constant. So our schools really got less per pupil over the last 6 years. We didn't put a dime in new textbooks for 6 years. Some of our schools around this state, the textbooks are falling apart. The kids can't take them home to study at night because, number one, they got to be used by the next class, and number two, they're falling apart. And they got to keep them there to keep them together. That's not how we move ahead. So, as I mentioned, I made tough choices. I made some cuts because not having any money, I've got to get some money if we're going to invest in education. And we are cutting many of our agencies who have been cut every year for 6 years, another 5%. Some of these agencies, assuming this budget passes, will have been cut over 41% in 6 years. Now, I ask you as a business person, if I was your boss and I came up to you and said, hey, I'm going to cut your budget 41% next year, but you are going to have to deliver the same services, same product, and keep it going just like you have before, there's not many of us that could figure out how to do that. But that's what a lot of these agencies have done. These are agencies that make sure our drinking water's clean, make sure that our restaurants are rated and that we know what we're getting when we go out to eat. You know, the basic things. But we're having to do that in order to have money to invest in education. I don't like it, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it because there's a priority here. We have got to reinvest in pre-K through 12 and in higher education. This budget proposes to increase the number of preschool students that will have preschool available to them in Kentucky by about 22%. There will be another 5,100 children that will be able to go to preschool in this budget. It costs us about $18 million a year. That is one of the most important investments we can make. There's money proposed in that budget to take this SEEK formula, this classroom funding formula, back to a little better than it was in 2008. Now, it's a lot of money, but that only gets us back to where we were 6 years ago. But it's a start, and we need to do that. There's money in there for textbooks, for professional training for our teachers, for public safety in the classroom. So we're reinvesting. In higher education, for the University of Kentucky, we are funding another Bucks for Brains program. This is a program where the universities in the past, when we've had this, have been able to bring in high-quality professors, create endowed chairs, and raise the whole level and quality of our university up to compete as they have to compete, not only in this country, but around the world. Our community college system, we're reinvesting there in some structures that need to be done. One of the structures that's going to be attached to the Bluegrass Community and Technical College is the Advanced Manufacturing Training Center in Georgetown. That was a part of the commitment we made to Toyota when they made the decision to come here and to bring that Lexus here. So there are a lot of things like that that are going on, and we're investing that money, I think, very wisely and in the right place. And by taking this approach, we will be able to continue that momentum that we have started over this last 6 years. Let me mention one other subject to you that I think has a direct relationship to the future of this state and to the future competitiveness of this state. We have an archaic, out-of-date tax system here in Kentucky. It's a tax system that was devised for a 20th century economy based on goods. But folks, we've gone in the last 40 years from spending most of our money on goods, we now spend most of our money on services. It's a different economy today than it was. And we need to modernize our tax code to make it more competitive and tie it to a 21st century economy. And so I'm going to be coming out next week with a tax reform proposal. And it's going to have a lot of moving parts. We're going to be looking at the rates that folks pay in income taxes and in corporate taxes, because some of our surrounding states have lower rates than we do. We're going to be looking at the sales tax, and do we spread that to some services, not raise it, but spread it to some services so that as our economy grows here in this state, which is now more a service economy, then our revenues will grow. So there's going to be a number of ideas. We're going to be looking at some of our signature industries to see if they are at a disadvantage, and are there things that we ought to do for them to make sure they've got a level playing field. So stay tuned. And I know as business people, when you mention tax reform, you'll stay tuned. I know that you will be interested. But I think you're going to see some things that you'll like, because this is not about just creating more money. This is about making us more competitive. And if we're more competitive and that tax code is tied to a 21st century economy, more money will come down the road. Because as our economy grows, it will produce more revenue that we can then invest in things like education and public safety and economic development. So, thank you all very much for having me. I appreciate it, and stay tuned as we get through this session. Thank you.
The governor has a few minutes here that he said he'd be more than happy to take questions. So, questions from the audience. We got a couple over here. Robert?
Thank you, Bob. Governor, appreciate you being here this morning. One of our largest industries in our state and a very key component to economic development is our aviation system. And we've had a sales tax on jet fuels for the last 12, 14 years that's being diverted into the general fund. And the FAA has taken notice of that and have sent your Department of Aviation a letter saying they've noticed the diversion of funds is against their rules, and they may consider withdrawing FAA support funds for aviation system. I know of 11 airports that are on the financial chopping block right now, and maybe more. And I just wonder if you're going to ramp up the funding for our aviation economic system.
Thanks. Certainly, our whole transportation system is a vital part of making us competitive. And one part of that system that you really don't hear a lot about, I mean, you hear a lot about our major airports. What you don't hear about are a lot of our regional, smaller community airports around this state that are very important tools to attracting jobs and businesses to those areas and to those communities. We have been somewhat limited over the last few years because of the recession in the way we can support those regional airports. But I recognize very much the necessity, not only the necessity, but the desirability of having them and having them in good shape so that we can use them to attract more jobs to this state. And we'll be working with you and folks like you that are interested in the future of those regional airports to make sure that they remain viable. You know, one thing that I didn't mention.
Governor Beshear, my name is Larry Jacoby, and I want you to know I have the utmost respect for what you've accomplished and what you're doing. And with that said, I wanted to bring an issue on the Affordable Care Act to your attention because I feel, as you know about it, you will certainly take action on it. The increase in prescription drugs that some of us has experienced since January has been astronomical. I want to give you two examples. My wife's prescription went up 5-fold. Now, we didn't like that, but it's not going to affect our lifestyle. A good friend of mine who has got a degree from the University of Kentucky in social work was displaced and has actually taken a job as a pizza delivery fella and has done that for 2 years to pay for his family. His drugs went from $83 a month to when he went in January, they said it was going to be $1,750 for the cost of his monthly prescriptions. He challenged that, and they said, okay, we're going to get it down to $950. I'm not sure what the government can do. In looking at it, my wife was told when she asked that the drug companies have inflated the cost of the drugs dramatically. It's not about deductibles. It's not about copays. And I would like to ask you two questions. One, is there anything the governor's office could do to look into the drug companies and how they spike those costs? And secondly, on an individual basis, is there anything that perhaps we could talk about later on to help my friend?
Well, first of all, the drug prices, as you've mentioned, are something that has drawn the attention of lots of folks. There have been various proposals in Congress to allow folks in the United States to be able to buy their drugs from other places, particularly Canada. Because if you go right across the line, the prices that you can get your drugs for in Canada, I'm told, are so much lower than here in the United States. So this market is an interesting market, and you know, there's some control mechanisms, it seems, in America that keep those prices propped up. Now, I'm sure there are good arguments on both sides in terms of what the price of drugs ought to be. And I'm sure that some of the companies will argue, and I think with some merit, that we have invested 20 years of research and all of this thing to develop this drug, and now we've got to be able to make our money back. And I understand all of that, but drug prices are too high in the United States. These companies can make money and not charge what they do. You know, the Affordable Care Act, what some people don't realize is that there are two parts to it. You know, there's a Medicaid part to it for low-income folks, but the other part of it, to get a qualified health plan, these are from private companies. These aren't government-owned health plans. I mean, this marketplace that I created, this exchange, simply allows Anthem, Humana, and all of these companies to have their policies on there. The policies have to meet certain basic standards that are in the law, but these are private insurance company policies. And so if there are issues like this, you better believe we'll look into it, because that doesn't sound right. There's something wrong there. And if you'll get us some of the information, we'll pursue that for this person and anybody else that has those kind of issues.
Governor, thank you for joining us. There is a piece of legislation in the State House that's working its way. I think it's out of committee now about raising the minimum wage. Our surrounding states do not have the minimum wage set as high as that piece of legislation wants to move it. Now, whether or not it passes federally is one thing, but it's probably not a good idea to place ourselves out of competition with other states as far as that is, and it seems like it's the wrong direction, but a better direction would be if we were a right-to-work state, and then that would increase businesses like you. I remember you had mentioned before that that's one of the things that business leaders also look for when they're choosing a state, where to locate and so on. So instead of going in the wrong direction with a higher minimum wage, if it's not raised federally, wouldn't it be better to go towards right to work to make us more attractive?
Well, I know I'm talking to a business group, and so this won't be probably as popular as I were talking to some other group. But I think it's time for this country to raise the minimum wage. I would challenge any of you to go out here on $14,500 and try to support your family. You know, I'm sorry, but that's just, it's almost impossible to do anymore. Will it mean some increase in prices? Maybe. Will it mean instead of a company making $2 million a year, it might make $1,950,000 a year? Maybe. But all of those things adjust. You know, the marketplace takes care of a lot of that, and I just look at your you know, many people that are getting back in this into jobs. We've got a lot of people out of work. The people that are getting back in, most of them are getting in on the bottom rungs of the labor ladder, because those are the jobs that are available. If a person has a living wage, guess what they're going to do? They're going to spend it in your store. They're going to spend it with your business. You know, a little more money in the economy I don't see as a bad thing, and circulating it in the economy is not a bad thing. Let me talk for a minute about right to work, because this is a political issue more than it is an issue that matters. Kentucky's not a right to work state. Tennessee is. South Carolina is. Look what is happening in Kentucky and look what's happening in Tennessee or South Carolina. Kentucky has, in my mind, the best of both worlds. If you want to run a business and have organized labor as your partner, you can. We've got some successful companies. Ford, we just announced another investment by Ford in Louisville. They now employ 8,500 people in this state, And it's one of the biggest employers in our state. And it's generating economic activity, just amazing economic activity. We've got Toyota, who is non-union, very successful, employs about 8,000 or so people. And look around our state. I mean, you can, you can't, but we've got both. Now go to Tennessee, right to work state. Volkswagen is in Tennessee. Guess what's happening? Organized labor's there organizing Volkswagen. Go to South Carolina, where Boeing is. They're right to work state. Organized labor is organizing Boeing. So really, whether or not you have labor activity in your state, it matters very little whether you've passed a law, the right to work type of legislation or not. It really matters what type of industry that you have, because there are certain industries around the country that are more labor intensive in terms of organized labor than other businesses. So we don't find, honestly, that it is a detriment to us one way or the other. And we get companies that are already in our state to sit down with someone looking at us who might raise that as an issue and talk to them. You know, we can tell them that it makes no difference here, but of course we would say that, but let this company who works here come and talk to you and get their perspective on this. And what we find when we do that is that issue sort of dissolves and goes away, and we move forward from there.
Governor, thanks for being here. If Kentucky had the best trained workforce in the nation, we wouldn't be at the bottom of many of the lists that you talked about, and we would have even more companies knocking on our door to be here. What can we do to make Kentucky have the best workforce in the nation, not just here, but in all parts of the state?
Well, it's training, it's health, and you know, we're moving forward on both of those things. I mean, our community and technical college system is going to play a huge role in the training of our workforce over the next 20 or 30 years, because so many of the 21st century jobs aren't jobs that necessarily require a 4-year bachelor's degree, but they do require a lot of advanced training and a lot of advanced skills. And we, for the first time in the last 6 years, have been able to get our pre-K through 12 educational establishment and our higher education establishment together. And they are now working to make sure that students that come out of our high schools are college and career ready. And then they move on into community college or our technical schools, and they develop those additional skills that they need. We are working right now with companies around the state to emphasize apprenticeship programs. You know, we saw this in Germany. We've been very successful over the last 2 or 3 years of recruiting businesses from Germany to come to Kentucky. Well, their education system is structured a little different than ours. And, you know, we're not going to overhaul ours overnight, but part of their education system is an apprenticeship program, basically in the high school time period. And you have people who work during the day at the plant, go to school and take courses. They get paid while they are in their courses and in their classes getting trained. And when they come out and graduate, they've got a job if they want it. And it's a good paying job. It's a high skilled job. And so we're looking at developing more of that to try to push our workforce to that level that we can attract. You know, what I want is for businesses to just be falling all over themselves to get into Kentucky because we got such a great workforce here. And they've had that experience in many of our areas, but we're not there yet.
Hello, Governor. I'm just going to ask you a question about the health care plan. What will be the price tag on the state health plan, and how do you plan to fund Connect?
Well, the state health plan, I assume you're talking about the one that state workers have. And that is funded through the general fund, as well as co-pays and all of that kind of stuff that we pay for being in the health plan. And I believe the budget has a 2% increase, which is one of the lowest inflationary increases we've had in a long time from a health cost standpoint. In terms of funding Connect, the Connect is our health benefits exchange, the one that everybody's been raving about because it worked. You know, it's great to stand out because something works. Ours worked, and it worked very well. And so we became the model nationwide for how to set up a healthcare exchange. That exchange has been funded by the federal government because that was part of the act, was funds to set up local exchanges if you wanted to run your own exchange. Come, I believe, 2015, it will be paid for with assessments on the companies that are part of the exchange.
We got one more question here, then I've got a couple, and then we're going to wrap up.
Hello, Governor Beshear. My name is Lamar Wilson, and I was wondering, how are you going to, in the future, explore promoting high-tech jobs in the form of maybe cryptocurrencies and trends like that, and also video gaming and things of that nature? I know we talk about manufacturing a lot, but how are you going to support those high-tech engineers and entrepreneurs here in the state?
You know, it's a great question, because when we talk about economic development, we all tend to talk about the things, the traditional kinds of things, advanced manufacturing, big things. Our state, the success of our state is going to depend more than anything else on small and medium-sized businesses. You know, right now, I think 90 to 95% of the businesses in Kentucky employ fewer than 50 people. So the future is going to continue to be those size businesses in Kentucky, and many of them started by entrepreneurs, by folks that get an idea and make that idea work. And so we're concentrating in that area. We created an Office of Entrepreneurship in our Cabinet for Economic Development, where we work directly with startup companies. We help them with the training they need, with knowing how to do a business plan, with knowing how to find financing, those kinds of things that will get a startup company off the ground. We have a unique program that matches federal grants that you can receive for high-tech startups. We match them dollar for dollar from the state level, which is unusual in this country, and therefore we attract a lot of new startup companies in the high-tech area in that way. We just organized the Angel Investor Network, and what this does is we've got a lot of people in this state with money that want to invest in startups. They want to make money, and they know that if they hit the right one, they'll make a lot of money. And so we're connecting those folks in a network with people like you or others that have ideas that can present their ideas to them and convince them, hey, that's a great idea, I'm going to invest in that, we'll support that, and we'll all make a lot of money. So all of those things are going on, and we want to encourage that kind of activity in Kentucky because that's a big part of our future.
Before we get to our final two questions, Katie had one more in the queue.
Yeah.
Governor, you mentioned earlier the fact that some folks in Washington would like to see prescriptions that folks can get them in other countries. Do you personally support that?
I think we ought to look at legislation that allows us to be able to buy our drugs, safe drugs, and obviously we would make sure of the quality of the drugs that you can buy, but I would like to see us be able to buy them wherever we can, assuming that they're safe. I think that would help the marketplace and to keep the price of drugs down.
So I never ask any questions, so I get to ask two questions here.
Go for it.
There's two issues, two items that people think can be very transformative for Lexington and Central Kentucky. One, you're hearing a lot more discussion, and I think Lexington's hearing more discussion about the local option tax. And if we would ever have the ability, if we want as a community, to tax ourselves. The other issue that I think people can visualize is, and there's a lot of talk and a lot of momentum building, is the Rupp Arena project. Could you address those two topics and give us your thoughts on those?
Yeah. Matter of fact, before I took that second question, I said, there's something I forgot to mention. Let me talk about the Convention Center and Rupp Arena first. Mayor, I'm a believer. I'm a believer that that project can transform Lexington, and particularly that end of Lexington. You know, Jane and I have spent most of our adult lives here, and we look at Lexington basically as our home. And it's a wonderful place to live, but we've got to continue making sure that it is vital, that the vitality is downtown, and that things happen downtown. And so I have put $65 million in bonding into this proposed budget to support the efforts of the mayor and others to redo the Convention Center and Rupp Arena downtown. I think that it will make a huge difference long term for Central Kentucky. All you got to do is go look at what the Yum Center did for downtown Louisville. Man, if you haven't been to Louisville lately, go see, because downtown is thriving. I mean, you see hundreds, if not thousands of people downtown almost every night because entertainment brings them down. Things going on at the Yum Center bring them down. Good restaurants bring them down. And a lot of them are living downtown now. So that has helped revitalize downtown Louisville, and I think the Convention Center and Rupp Arena will help revitalize downtown Lexington. I mean, you've got some great things going now. There's a lot more going on downtown than there's ever been, and this can certainly add to it. I'm also in favor of this proposal to allow a local option sales tax, and it will have to be a constitutional amendment placed on the ballot, and people will get to vote on it. But the concept is a pretty simple one, and it's about the most basic democratic concept you can come up with. What it will allow a place like Lexington to do is the council and the mayor sit down and they say, you know what, we think we need three specific projects for downtown Lexington to be built to make a big difference. And so they put a proposal together, they figure out what it's going to cost, and they figure out, okay, to fund those bonds, to build all of that, we need to raise the sales tax on top of the 6%, that's the state sales tax rate, a half a cent for 20 years. Then they take that proposal, if they like it, and they put it on the ballot. And everybody in this community gets to express their opinion. If you think it's a good idea and you want to vote for it, you do. If you don't think it is, you vote against it. If it passes, then you get to go out and do those things and execute that plan. If it doesn't, nothing happens. And that half-cent tax, or whatever it is sunset at the end of a specific period of time. And so this lets communities make their own decisions on things like that. I became a believer, quite honestly, when I went with Commerce Lexington, back before I was governor, to Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City was able to do this. And they decided that they needed a baseball park and that they needed an arena for basketball and a few other things. And they put it on the ballot. It passed. Today, they've got a AAA baseball team downtown. They got an NBA basketball team downtown. So those are the kinds of things that can happen in a community if you let them make their own decisions. So hopefully we'll get that passed.
Governor, thank you very much. Let's give the governor another round of applause and thank him for coming.
Thank you.